That morning, no one knew who she was. A simple dress, a worn-out bag, a quiet presence. And in a room full of inherited wealth, there she was, standing alone. They mocked her, took her photo, and humiliated her on social media. They didn't hesitate for a second to push her aside. But no one knew who she really was. Until the big screen lit up, and that voice rang out. This woman is my wife. If you want to see that real inheritance isn't money, watch this story all the way through. Here's the translation for that as well. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Because real stories inspire real people. The moment Hannah stepped into the room, silence deepened. Her gray linen dress, faded cardigan, and flat shoes made her look like a stranger amidst the sparkling designer suits and flashy jewelry. Discreet glances and mocking whispers spread quickly. The inheritance meeting, which had been called in Daniel's absence, was about to turn into a battleground. But no one knew that this quiet woman was the war itself. Tobias, with his gold tie and dark suit, leaned against a table, his smile laced with sharp sarcasm. "Who let the cleaning staff in?" he said loudly enough for all the cousins to burst into laughter. Vanessa, in her red satin dress, leaned in beside him, shrugging her shoulder as if dismissing her. "Maybe she came to dust off the will," she said. Laughter filled the room, but there wasn't the slightest twitch on Hannah's face. In the back row, Emily, the social media influencer and entrepreneur, rolled her eyes. She leaned toward her best friend Lily and said in a mocking tone, "This woman's definitely a charity case. Or an old forgotten lover of Daniel's. Just look at her bag like she's brought lunch with her." Lily quietly snapped a photo. "I'm posting this to my story right now," she giggled. Emily had already written her post. Someone from Daniel's charity list crashed the will reading. "She probably thinks she can make a fortune with secondhand clothes." Hannah said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on the empty chair at the front of the room. That was where lawyer Walter was supposed to sit. She gripped the simple cloth bag tightly. It wasn't branded, nor expensive, but it carried a real storm inside. Because Hannah wasn't there by accident. The reason she was in that room was much deeper than anyone could imagine. Everyone in the room believed Daniel had disappeared 6 months ago. His private jet had vanished over the ocean, and no wreckage was ever found. Most people assumed he was dead. Some even hoped so. Because his disappearance meant a massive inheritance was up for grabs. Partnerships with tech giants, luxury villas, billion-dollar patents. But no one knew Hannah was Daniel's wife. Not Tobias, not Emily, and not the other relatives who'd lived in Daniel's shadow for years. They all mistook Hannah's silence for weakness. But that day, Hannah wasn't there with silence. She came with justice. And that moment was just the beginning. At exactly 10 o'clock, the big door to the room opened. When lawyer Walter entered, the buzzing inside immediately stopped. The old man's every step seemed to carry the weight of the documents he held. His dark gray suit made him look dignified, but when his gaze landed on Hannah for just a moment, Tobias furrowed his brow. This tiny moment was an unsettling detail for him. Walter slowly opened a heavy bag and pulled out a single envelope. He didn't make an opening speech or offer any formal niceties to match the atmosphere of the crowd. He quietly broke the seal of the envelope and, with serious eyes scanning the room, began speaking. "We are here to read the last and valid will of Daniel Alexander Kruger. This document was prepared 3 years ago, notarized, and legally binding." A murmur spread across the room. 3 years, Emily whispered, turning to Lily in shock. Daniel had only disappeared 6 months ago. Had he really prepared something like this years before his death? Tobias interrupted. "Come on, let's skip the formal nonsense. Let's see who's getting what." Thomas, similar to Gerald, crossed his arms and muttered, "I hope the stocks come to me." Ingrid, lost in thoughts about the fate of the vacation home, started fiddling with her rings. Walter carefully opened the document that had come out of the envelope. He raised his voice slightly and began reading the words, "I, Daniel Alexander Kruger, in sound mind, make this will. The only thing I will leave to my family, colleagues, and acquaintances is the truth itself. Wealth reveals character, not value." A hush fell over the room. Emily's hand holding her phone trembled. Tobias's eyes narrowed. Vanessa's red-painted nails dug into the armrest. Hannah remained silent, but her eyes pierced through every word Walter spoke. Walter continued, "All my assets, company shares, properties, accounts, and intellectual rights are left to one person only. The one who loved me unconditionally, who wanted neither my fame nor my fortune. My wife, Hannah. It was as if the walls of the room had collapsed in on themselves. Tobias jumped to his feet. This is nonsense. Daniel wasn't married. Emily whispered in a near shout. What? Was it? Was this woman? Lily's face turned pale. Thomas slammed his fist on the table. This is fraud. Daniel would never marry someone like her. Ingrid, panicking, turned to Trevor and muttered, We don't even know her. Where did this woman come from? Walter raised his hands, silencing the chaos. The will is valid. We have the marriage certificate, witness statements, private correspondences, and validating documents. He pulled out a file from his bag and opened it. In the photo, Daniel was smiling beside Hannah, wearing a simple white dress. In the background, a small courthouse, with the date written below, 7 years ago. The room fell silent once more. Tobias slammed his fist on the table. This is madness. Who does this woman think she is? Emily jumped to her feet. She's about to claim a fortune, but she wasn't even around. And then, at that moment, Hannah took a step forward. The sound of her simple shoes touching the floor was silent, but it echoed in everyone's heart like a thunderclap. Her cardigan moved slightly, her linen dress softly glowing in the dim light. She had the bag on her shoulder. Her posture was upright, her gaze calm. But that silence was like the stillness before a storm. Walter bowed his head slightly, with a hint of respect. Mrs. Kruger. Hannah took the file. She looked at the photo. Her lips curled ever so slightly, as if a memory from the past had poked her heart. Then she raised her head, turned toward the crowd, and spoke for the first time. I'm not after the money, she said. I just wanted to see who truly loved Daniel. And in that moment, no one was the same anymore. Hannah's words fell like a stone in the middle of the room small, but their impact spread in waves. Who loved Daniel, and who only wanted his inheritance, she had said. That sentence still hung in the air. Everyone in the room either avoided eye contact or clenched their teeth. Until that moment, they had underestimated the woman's silence. But now, that silence had turned into a suit of steel armor. Tobias tried to laugh, but his voice trembled. You're saying you're his wife? In that outfit, a man like Daniel chose you? He stammered, caught between mocking and defending himself. Hannah turned her gaze to Tobias, calmly. Yes, because Daniel never measured a person's heart by their clothes. Vanessa put her hands on her hips and stepped forward, fuming. This is a show. What makes you his wife? You can't convince anyone with just a photo. Not with a photo, Hannah replied, her voice still steady. With documents. With witnesses. With memories. Meanwhile, Walter pulled a new file from his bag. Inside were the marriage certificate, bank statements, handwritten letters from Daniel, and even videos from their wedding day. When the laptop connected to the big screen and began displaying the footage, no one could breathe. Daniel, 7 years ago, smiling as he held Hannah's hand. In the background, Nurse Anna and Librarian Jonas were standing as witnesses to the wedding. Daniel's smile was genuine, the smile of love, peace, and simplicity. One by one, the faces of the onlookers fell. Emily lowered her head. Lily's phone slipped from her hands. Tobias slumped back into his chair, swallowing hard. Vanessa shook her head, stepping back in disbelief. But the worst part was the note on Hannah's back. The small piece of paper that Tobias had just attached. Written in bold letters, Charity. Hannah took the bag off her shoulder, quietly retrieved the note, and handed it to Tobias. This word sums up your character, she said. At that moment, the silence in the room was almost sacred. Just then, Hannah took out a small remote from her bag. It was palm-sized, a simple device. She looked directly at Tobias and spoke. Daniel isn't dead. A murmur rose in the room. Tobias jumped to his feet. What nonsense are you talking? But Hannah had already pressed the button. The image on the screen at the back of the room shifted. In a dimly lit room, a man was sitting. His face was familiar. His sharp gaze and weary yet determined stance. Daniel. He was live. The date and time flashed in the corner of the screen. April 15th, 2025, 10:32. Hello, Daniel said, his voice deep and clear. I guess you thought I was dead too soon. The room erupted into screams, muffled whispers, and chairs flying back. Tobias's face turned pale. Emily covered her mouth with her hand. Vanessa stepped back, nearly tripping. Daniel continued. I've stayed silent for 6 months. I wanted to see who would fill this room. Was it my fortune they wanted, or was there anyone who truly missed me? Was there anyone who looked into my eyes and truly felt sorrow? Hannah warned me. They only want the inheritance, she said. She was right. The image of Daniel on the screen shifted to focus on Hannah. And you, he said, his voice softening a little. You planned everything perfectly. Hannah tilted her head slightly. Her eyes were shining now, but with pride. Daniel still being alive was more valuable to her than any money. Daniel looked outside the frame and spoke a single word. Open the doors. When the massive doors of the room opened again, this time, it wasn't just Hannah who was silent. Everyone was. Because Daniel, truly, was there. His steps were slow but determined. He wore a simple jacket. His shoes were worn, but with every step, he carried dignity. He approached Hannah, took her hand. Hannah's lips twitched slightly, but no words came. Daniel turned to face the crowd. I've seen your true faces, he said. And the reckoning was just beginning. With Daniel's entrance, the entire atmosphere changed. The power balance shifted completely in an instant. The people who had been mocking, belittling, and laughing just moments ago now shrank into their seats, avoiding eye contact, turning into mere shadows. Daniel briefly squeezed Hannah's hand. Then, he turned to face the crowd. You think you're here for the inheritance today, but in reality, being here was about revealing your character. Hannah made the plan. I watched. I listened to every look, every mockery, every dismissive word you said. He paused for a moment. His eyes locked onto Tobias. You called my wife a cleaning lady. You mistook her silence for weakness. But in reality, that silence was powerful enough to crush your arrogance. Tobias swallowed hard. Daniel, listen. If we had known it was her. Daniel's voice grew sharp. You shouldn't have known. The way you treated a woman you didn't even know already put you to the test. Emily stood up. Please, this is a mistake. We didn't know who she was. We hadn't even seen a photo. But now we understand everything. We're sorry. Hannah tilted her head slightly. No, you didn't understand. You were just caught. Daniel motioned to Walter with his head. The lawyer stood up and pulled a second document from his bag. This document is an addendum to the will. It was handwritten by Daniel Kruger 3 months ago and notarized. The room held its breath. Walter opened the document and began reading. Anyone who has acted in a degrading, dismissive, or mocking manner toward Hannah during today's will reading, if identified by video recordings, audio recordings, or witness statements, will be permanently banned from the inheritance and all of Daniel Kruger's business activities. The words hung heavy in the air, like the atmosphere in the room. Tobias's face turned ashen. Emily's hand began to tremble, and Lily didn't even rise from her seat. Vanessa gripped her cardigan tightly, trying to breathe. Walter continued. The names to be expelled: Tobias Kruger, Vanessa Kruger, Emily Schroeder, Lily Meyer, Thomas Wagner, Ingrid Wagner, Max Kruger. Each name echoed through the room like a slap. Emily couldn't hold back her tears. Tobias leapt to his feet. You can't do this. I'm family. We share blood. Daniel shook his head. But there was no family in your hearts. Family is not built on blood. It's built on loyalty, respect, and empathy. The moment you saw Hannah, you disregarded her, tried to crush her. That's why you're no longer family. Security guards, who had been waiting by the door, approached Tobias. One gently but firmly touched his arm. Tobias angrily swiped them off. You can't throw me out. This will ruin everything. Daniel stood tall. No, Tobias. This will fix everything. Vanessa tried to protest, but the words got stuck in her throat. Emily, eyes full of tears, turned to Hannah and whispered, Please forgive me. But Hannah's expression didn't change. This wasn't the time for forgiveness. This was the day for justice. Daniel turned his gaze to Emily. This isn't about forgiveness. This was about passing the test. And you failed. Walter pulled out one final document. With this document, all shares, powers, and privileges under the Daniel Kruger holding company held by the mentioned individuals are revoked. All representation rights related to the brand, including social media, are canceled. Emily's phone started vibrating. Her eyes widened. Sponsors, partnerships, accounts, everything was being erased one by one. Lily's screen displayed access denied. Clara, the social media queen, watched as Emily collapsed, her face drained of color. Tobias was still shouting as he was escorted toward the door. But those screams were no longer a voice of power. They were the sound of loss, of desperation. And the room, with each expelled person, seemed to lighten. It had been a place of luxury, but coldness. Now, it felt as though it had been cleansed of its weight. Finally, only a few people remained. Anna, the elderly nurse. Jonas, the librarian who had witnessed the wedding years ago. And Elsa, the gardener, who handed a glass of water to Hannah and asked, "Are you okay?" Daniel turned to look at the three of them. You showed respect to a stranger. Smiling, asking, supporting, simple but true human virtues. And you showed them. Hannah, her eyes filled with tears, nodded slightly to Elsa. Thank you. Daniel took Hannah's hand once more. You did everything right, he said, looking into her eyes. Hannah shook her head slightly. But a part of me always hoped they could be better. Daniel spoke softly. They lost. But you never lost yourself. And in that moment, the whole world fell silent. Under the dim lights of the room, only those who deserved to remain were left. The dazzling dresses, gold ties, and expensive jewelry had been replaced by simple smiles and a deep sense of peace. The arrogance of those raised in luxury had crumbled in the face of true love and loyalty. The ones left behind carried the richness of the heart, not of display. Daniel sat down beside Hannah without letting go of her hand. It was as if he had missed her for not months, but years. They silently looked at each other, their gaze speaking thousands of words in quiet but resonant meaning. Then Daniel turned his head, looking toward Walter. Walter, he said in a firm tone, let's start the real management plan now. Walter nodded, pulling one last file from his bag. The thick folder only had one word written on it. Future. Daniel Kruger, Walter began, officially announces the transfer of control and all strategic management rights of his company to his wife, Hannah Kruger. For a moment, even Hannah hesitated. Daniel, we didn't plan this. I never wanted this much, she whispered. Daniel smiled. But you deserve this. You protected me. You revealed the true intentions. And you did it not for show, but for love. That's why this isn't just a company transfer. It's a thank you for giving me my life back. Hannah paused for a few seconds. Then she took the folder. As her fingers caressed the cover, her eyes sparkled. This wasn't the victory she had dreamed of, but it was the proud stance of a woman whose honor had been restored. It was a silent thank you, not shouted or proven, but the peace that came from being understood. Anna, Jonas, and Elsa silently clapped. Those claps weren't for the crowd, but for humanity. Quiet but powerful, just like Hannah. Daniel turned to face the crowd, then looked at the three people sitting in the now empty room. This empire will no longer be built on show, but on character. Because the Real inheritance isn't money. It's the legacy we leave behind. Hannah looked out the large window of the room. The spring sun illuminated the hills, and the wind gently rustled the long grass. In that natural scene, there was the promise of a life free from all this chaos. Then she took Daniel's hand, and together, they left the room. The doors slowly closed behind them. Security, luxury, intrigue, humiliation, victory. It all stayed behind that large stone door. From that day forward, Hannah never spoke about the past again. Cameras didn't focus on her. She turned down interview offers. Because for her, what mattered was this: the truth doesn't need to be shown. It only needs to be lived. As she ran the company, she took a different approach. She mentored young people, provided daycare for employees' families, and supported schools in rural areas. And she preserved Daniel's name, not as just a brand, but as a value known for its honesty. Over time, people began telling her story. A simple woman, silenced an entire inheritance hall, they said. But for Hannah, all of this talk was just noise. True success was what she felt outside the hall, in the first light of the dawn, looking into Daniel's eyes, to be understood, to be loved, to be respected. And that morning, Hannah went down to the kitchen. Daniel was still asleep. She looked out the window. Elsa was watering the flowers in the garden. Jonas was taking the newspaper from the mailbox. Anna had already gone for her morning walk. Life was quiet, but inside Hannah, there was a symphony, because now she held something real, not power, not revenge, her own voice. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video, because every story could be someone else's awakening. And maybe one day, Your story will be told here.